to afford pharmacare?
We're calling for a whole task force to sit down and really look at pharmaceuticals, look at all of our healthcare spending, and just see what the best way to approach it is. So we don't have that developed yet as a full sort of understanding of where we're going to go with pharmacare or providing drug coverage. We do know it's too expensive, and we do need to provide some more support around drug costs. But how we're going to get there, we're calling for a review of healthcare and to really tackle that question. We know it's an issue, and we know it needs to be addressed.
All right, and our last question on that. What is your plan to keep doctors working in small communities like ours?
I think some of the programs that I've been encouraging have been ones in which there's a bit of a sort of rural support for doctors that are choosing to practice outside of the large cities, and we need to maybe do more encouragement of that. I also think the other thing that's really been good is it's been having a medical school, for example, in Prince George, so people get a chance to get outside of the big city, do their medical training in a different environment that is a smaller city with more rural experiences, and that shifts and changes a physician, any person working, and sees the attraction of the lifestyle. So we need to do a lot more of that, and enhancing those places of learning and education, and maybe just in the form of residencies outside in rural areas. We could do a lot better job of encouraging that. But it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue with services in general out in smaller towns and rural communities, and it's one of those places where there's been a fair amount of neglect. The government has really not continued the kind of support that we need to see, and so we need a reinvestment in our rural areas as well.
Awesome. Okay, our next topic is food production, and there's one question on that.
I actually don't think was. Can you ask it?
Yep. In your platform, what do you mean by a bigger focus, and what are some of the concrete actions you're going to take?
Right now, about 70% of the vegetables we eat in BC come from the U.S., and about 50% of them come from California. The big concern will be with climate change, with the lack of sustainability about sort of the way our food industry is set up, and the kind of food insecurity that we're beginning to experience, is that that's going to grow over time. So we need to be really intentional about growing more food here in BC, and that means encouraging agriculture and finding different ways of doing that. We know that for example, there's less farmland in BC now being developed and used to grow food. It's kind of gone down by about sort of 6% in the last few years. We need to reverse that trend. We need to get more of our farmland in use. It's going to be encouraging a lot of you to consider agriculture as a career, as a possibility. I've got a younger daughter who's 22. She lives in Victoria. She's a foodie, and she went off to Africa at 18 to go to Ghana and had this life-changing experience there, and then came back and got her horticulture diploma. And I've taught in horticulture as well at the university. Went back to the same program I taught in, and now she's into food and food security in Victoria. She works at a bunch of different organic farms, and she's really keen on this whole revolution that's taking place. And Allie, I think, for me, she's a sign of what I'm seeing among young people, which is a growing awareness of where the food comes from, how to grow their own food, how to produce for themselves, how to be more self-resilient, and also a more localized economy as well. That she does a lot of stuff by barter. There's no sort of food exchange. And, they do this other stuff where they go and collect food around the city and then bring it and kind of make this big collective meal. So all this kind of free food that they get, and they have this free meal. It's kind of an act of food security, but all the wasted food in Victoria. So yeah, so I think there's a movement developing, a reaction. And as a Green Party, we just want to encourage that to happen. We don't want to see more of that happen, and we can do that through some good policy related to agriculture.
Awesome. All right, we have some questions about local issues, starting with the Kinder Morgan pipeline.
It's you, Kelton.
I don't have the Kinder Morgan pipeline.
Mr. Bernard, I'm asking.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So many workers in this valley are counting on some much needed jobs from the construction of the pipeline. if you cancel the Kinder Morgan pipeline project, what do you tell these people?
Yeah, thank you. And we are, as a party, we're very clear that we don't support the Kinder Morgan pipeline. And I'll just let me say a few words of why that's the case. We know that what comes to mind are tankers on the coast and bitumen spills, which we know we have no ability to clean up. I mean, there's no, that's a made-up idea that there's a world-class spill response that's gonna save us from a tanker going down the bitumen. So there's that whole issue. There's also pipeline ruptures and bursts and bitumen getting into our river system, getting into the soil as a contaminant. Will have a very, very almost impossible time cleaning up after it ever did happen. Those are big concerns for me and for many people. What's primary for me when we talk about pipelines is that they're an attachment to the 20th century economy that we need to somehow outgrow. And if we keep reinvesting in them, if we keep encouraging them, keep permitting them and allowing them to be, we're going to stay stuck in the past. We're going to continue to stay reliant on the very things we need to slowly get ourselves off of. And I think Kinder Morgan, for me and for many, is one pipeline too many. It's a turning point of us really beginning to take responsibility for where we're going. The other problem I have with Kinder Morgan and with all the pipelines that are shipping raw product like bitumen is that, once again, it's a classic sort of story of Canadian colonialism. That we take a raw product, we try to get it to Tidewater, we put it in a tanker, and that is the cheapest, least processed, least value-added product. So instead of slowing it down a bit, doing more refining here in Canada, actually using that product and getting more value for it, and then therefore getting more employment from it, we ship it away as the cheapest, rawest, dirtiest product we can. It's the same with raw logs. You know, we instead of milling those logs and using them for value added here in BC, we load them on barges in record numbers and ship them off the coast. We need to kind of get out of the mentality that our resources don't have value for us, and they only have value as a raw product. So that's one of my big sort of bones of contention, I guess, around pipelines, is that they allow us to continue to flood raw product out of the country, and there's no value added in that, very little value added in that. I mean, there's some extraction jobs, there's a few construction pipeline jobs that are temporary, they're only gonna last as long as the pipeline's being built. I think Kinder Morgan, the total number is 10 employees once it's actually up and running, that you actually need, you know. So it's not going to be sort of the big employment solution. So if we're going to say no to pipelines, what are we going to say yes to? There's a lot of things we could be saying yes to. The entire renewable energy revolution that's going on, we could say yes to. Forestry is the huge neglected file. As we've had a government that's been chasing liquid natural gas, they have not been considering what's going on with forestry. We have some of the best fiber in the world. We have huge opportunities when it comes to forestry. Again, we're just not doing it wisely. We're not looking at all the value of our forest. And so we need to be considering other opportunities besides just one project, one pipeline.
We're just about done. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 more questions. If
Yeah,
you have to leave because you have a meeting and whatnot, take 30 seconds to exit, and we'll be another 5 minutes or so.
Thanks. I'll just skip the next question.
So we're moving on to then logging
Yeah.
in the upper
Yeah.
Clearwater Valley. So there's 2 questions on that.
Okay. Okay. So are you aware of the issue about logging in Upper Clearwater?
I am.
So as our MLA, what could you do to resolve that situation?
So the upper valley and a lot of the other stories that are coming out of the interior around forestry, what they speak to is the failure for us to really do good land use planning anymore, and to do proper forest stewardship plans, and to really look at what's going on in the forest and to see what the value is. You know, there is value in the timber, there's value in logging the timber for sure, and I come from a logging family. My dad was a bucker, a faller bucker. So the forest industry has a huge future for us in BC. But we have to be wise about it. We have to look at particular projects and particular blocks and locations with a set of values that are also informed by more than just timber. And when we get into, say, the mountain caribou survival, that's a key question for us going forward. We know we're going to lose most of the southern herd, if not, all of the mountain caribou. And that is simply because of habitat loss, and because of the fact that no one was really being attentive to what was going on with the caribou. And they're just a visible species, but we know that so much else is going on as well. And that has inherent value. And I would argue it has to be held in balance with any kind of short-term economic gain. At the same time, we can't, we have a working forest. We have a place where there's opportunity for employment, and where logs have value, and we can do something with them, and we can provide a good lifestyle for one another. So in the particular issue of the Upper Clearwater, I think that people are making a good argument for the fact that there's the need for us to really look carefully and to be cautious about logging some of those areas. It's not just about just the idea of clear-cutting the forest and maybe losing it, but it's also big issues around stability and hydrology and what's really going on up there. And there's a kind of a dispute going on between the company that wants to log it and people that want to protect the area. And it seems like there's a conflicting set of scientific understanding of what's going on up there. So there's definitely the need for us to slow it down and to sit down together and to really talk. And as an MLA, that's the kind of conversations that we need to have in the province. We need to have the kind of conversations that allow us to sit down and actually really do some good land use planning again. That's, if I have my biggest complaints about what's going on the last 15 years, 16 years in the province, it's that we've had a provincial government that's not good at planning. They don't seem to believe in planning. I don't know what the plan is. None of us do. And everything is all reactive. It's all just kind of policy by focus group, I call it. It's just, you're just doing political decisions, but not really looking to say what's in the best interest of all of us in the long run. And that's the kind of planning we need to be doing.
All right, and then we have one more question on local issues, and this is about highway safety.
So how would you proceed as our MLA if a group of residents asked for some major improvements on a section of Highway 5?
Yeah, and I know that's a really serious concern, and those are just going to be ongoing for us to deal with, and trying to balance them in light of all the other priorities in the province. And when we get into safety concerns around particular bad stretches of road, really sitting down together and figuring out what the best way to go about that. And there are mechanisms in place in doing that. And I know it's always frustrating when our area of concern is the most visible to us, because we're seeing the impact. I mean, people are dying. I mean, it's not like it's a minor concern. It's huge, and it affects all of us.
Savannah D to the office, please. Savannah D to the office. Thank you.
School.
I love it. Yeah. So I don't have anyone who promises that I'm going to come into office and I'm going to fix that highway and I'm going to fix this 5-kilometer stretch of it, and I can promise you that, is not really telling the truth, because you have to balance it out with all these other needs, and you can't promise that as an MLA. You can't. All you can say is, I'm going to advocate for the community. I'm going to make sure that their voice is heard, and I'm going to do all that I can. And that's all I can promise, because there's so many other demands and pressures, and it's a big taffy pull. You're going in all directions and trying to kind of cover as much of it as you can and be wise with the resources that we have. But we don't have limitless resources. We have to make some good calls. But that's a really big area of concern, and I think it's always comes up every campaign. Every question goes up, every community looking at their highways and saying, how can we make this a bit safer and work better for us?
Awesome. Well, that's the last question that I have.
We have a bit more to do with Mr. Hines, but if you guys want to have your lunch break before the other class starts.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's really nice meeting you.